With us here in the studio is human rights attorney William Julié. Thanks for joining us.
Good evening.
Lots to unpack there. I'll begin with the last point, which is this call for an end to stop and search, or what some in the U.S. call stop and frisk, which is common practice among the French police.
Yeah, it is. I mean, legally speaking, I think that refers to the contrôle de police administrative.
Because in France, you don't need probable cause to...
You do. Yeah, in France, there are several legal frameworks applicable. One is for the contrôle de police judiciaire. That roughly means that when there's a crime scene or suspicion of a crime having been committed, then the police can check people around there. Then there is contrôle ordered by le procureur de la République, which are also judicial police, which target special areas in a special time frame and special offences. For example, the Gare du Nord, a suspicion of drug trafficking, and then during 24 hours, the police can carry out random checks there.
And those random checks include asking for ID papers?
Absolutely, within a time limit and a location and a connection with specific offences being usually committed there.
Because with a lot of our neighbours, you don't need ID papers. You can walk around with just your keys in your pocket.
So, definitely, these are the possibly more random checks, but they are with limits from a judge, or at least a prosecutor. And then you have these other more random checks, and I think these are the ones which are the most criticized, are the ones to do with police administrative. And these have to do with the only risk which is sufficient of trouble à l'ordre public. Meaning that if the police considers that there's no offense being committed, that they don't intervene in the scope of this special requisition of the prosecution service, then they can just check someone if they consider that there's a risk of this threat to the public order. And that obviously is a more wide...
Are you arguing that they should have warrants to be able to do it? What are you suggesting? What framework would you want, William Julié?
I don't think it's for me to say what needs to be done. I think the judges will do that. But clearly, I think that the framework which poses the more questions and that puts the population and some in the population, not all, we will get to that, I imagine, in a second. But the framework that I think is the most risky one is this one of contrôle de police administrative. And I imagine that this is maybe the framework that needs to be at least amended.
How do you amend it? What are you suggesting? Do you think, first of all, that there is systemic racial profiling in the police?
There's a huge problem in France. I tried to check the numbers. It's not only in France. I was checking for the UK. I think the ratios are kind of the same. And the numbers go from kind of 3 times more risk of being checked your ID if you are from Black or Northern African origin in France, up to 10 or 12. And I think in England for the Black population is kind of 9. So there is a massive and huge issue. And I think that everybody, except for people who are not going to say things as they are, knows it. And it was actually said by President Macron himself, who made a declaration on that. So there's a major problem. Then the question is, how do you tackle that? And some requests of the associations who filed in this special recourse before the...
Yeah, because let's talk about that.
Yeah, there's suggestions.
They put down their suggestions in January of 2021, and they say that they took their case to the highest administrative court because they never got an answer. Why?
Yeah. So there have been precedents with sentences, and the government has been considered liable and responsible for non-legitimate ID checking by the police.
But why didn't the government respond to their suggestions? Their calls for structural reform?
I don't know. I mean, I think this is about politics as much as it is about law. I think there are ways to improve things, and I think that this decision might be instrumental.
Is it possible to sit down and find common ground when you have a government who's got a very law and order interior minister, and they're scared of people voting for the far right?
That is what I was referring to, saying that it might be as political as a legal problem. And I imagine maybe no one from the government decided to move on to this issue because of what you just mentioned, which is that it's a hugely sensitive matter in terms of elections to come. And I think nobody wanted to go there. So maybe now they are going to have to go there, but it must be recalled that there's been a decision from the Conseil constitutionnel not so long ago in 2016 when the legal provisions enabling these police ID checks were challenged as being contrary to the Constitution, and the Conseil constitutionnel said no, they are not contrary to the Constitution, but suggested guidelines and said that they were constitutional, but that it needed to be
within a framework.
Exactly, within a framework that was determined by the Conseil constitutionnel.
So is it possible to find a common ground?
I think so. I think
where is that common ground?
I think it will come from this decision, because the difference between what happened before the Conseil constitutionnel and what did not happen politically might happen now, because this application will enable le Conseil d'État to instruct, to give not recommendations, but to tell the government, the state, that things need to be done, and that is an order. It's a judicial order to do something and to find remedies, and the judges, the Conseil d'État, will be able to say what they want the government to do. And that would be a premiere, obviously, in this matter. And I was looking for precedents in regards to these group applications that can be handed over to the Conseil d'État. And it's a quite recent legal framework, and I didn't find any precedents where it was a success. Maybe this one will be one of the first.
One final question. You were with us, William Julié, after the killing of Naël, when there were those riots in June and July. What conclusions are you seeing that the government's drawn? Is it a hunkering down in an us versus them mentality, or is it open to reform?
No, I think the open to reform is what we discussed. It's not got to do in the first place with legal issues. It's got to do with political will. Then
Which direction's the government taking?
I don't know. I count on this decision. And regarding this case that you were referring to, what I see is that for the moment there's been no special reform, but what I see is that this policeman is still in prison, and there had been at the time a lot of talk about what is going to happen to him, and I hear that there's been a lot of noise about police associations supporting him, saying that he should not be in prison, etc. But I see that for the moment, he is still in prison, and it seems that the courts and the investigating judge and judges and prosecutors dealing with his case have considered that he has reasons to still be in prison. That is all I know about the case.
In that particular case, William Julié, many thanks for joining us here on France 24.
Thanks for your invitation.
Stay with us. There's much more to come. More news, plus the day's business and sports. It may be the world's most famous transmission tower, but it's what we put in to the France 24 debate that makes it unique. Join us at that crossroads where differing perspectives meet to argue the point about the stories that matter to you. The debate here on France 24 and France24.com.